Isabella Rossetti, queen of New York Fashion Week, was at the edge of a career crisis. Her last 3 collections had failed, her inspiration seemed dried up. Searching for cheap labor, she entered a small workshop in Queens, where she saw a young girl sewing in the corner. The fabric in the child's hand stopped Isabella's heart. Maria, the 14-year-old, was creating designs that Isabella had drawn in her youth and thought she had destroyed. But these designs existed only in Isabella's mind, or so she thought. How did Maria know these secret drawings? And why, when looking at her, did Isabella remember her little sister Lucia from the Italian village she left 25 years ago? Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the journey. The sound of Isabella Rossetti's Louboutin heels echoed through the empty halls of her Manhattan design studio like a funeral march. At 45, she had ruled New York's fashion world for 2 decades, her name synonymous with elegance, innovation, and ruthless perfectionism. But today, the silence in her usually bustling atelier told a different story. "Isabella, we need to talk." Her business partner Marcus Sterling stood in the doorway, his face grave. Behind him, the morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows cast long shadows across cutting tables that should have been busy with her next collection. Isabella didn't look up from the sketch she was desperately trying to perfect. "If it's about the Times Review, I don't want to hear it." "It's not just the Times." Marcus entered, placing a stack of newspapers on her desk. "Vogue called your last show tired and uninspired. Harper's Bazaar said you're living in the past. Elle suggested you should consider retirement." The words hit like physical blows, but Isabella's expression remained stone. She'd built her reputation on being untouchable, above criticism, a creative force that bent the fashion world to her will. But 3 consecutive failed collections had shaken that foundation. "The investors are nervous," Marcus continued. "Sales are down 60%. The board is questioning whether you still have what it takes." Isabella finally looked up, her green eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and desperation. "I built this empire from nothing, Marcus. When I came to New York 25 years ago, I had $50 and a suitcase full of dreams. I'm not giving up now." "Then what's your plan?" "Because whatever magic you used to have, it's gone. Your designs feel empty. Like you're going through the motions." The accusation stung because it was true. For months, Isabella had sat at her drawing board, pencil in hand, waiting for inspiration that never came. The passion that had once consumed her, the artistic fire that made her legendary, seemed extinguished. "I'll figure it out," she said coldly. "I always do." But as Marcus left, Isabella stared at her reflection in the dark computer screen. The woman looking back was still beautiful, still commanding, but something essential was missing. The creative soul that had driven her to the top had somehow vanished, leaving behind only the cold machinery of business success. Her phone rang. "Ms. Rossetti? This is Elena from production. About the new collection, we need to discuss budget constraints." Budget constraints. The words that had never applied to Isabella Rossetti's world were now defining it. "What are you saying, Elena? We need to find cheaper manufacturing if we want to maintain margins. The board is insisting on cost cuts." Isabella closed her eyes. 25 years ago, she'd sworn never to compromise on quality, never to let money dictate art. But now, with her back against the wall, she found herself saying, "Fine. Find me options." 2 hours later, Isabella sat in the back of her car as it navigated through Queens traffic toward an address Elena had provided. The neighborhood grew progressively rougher, the gleaming towers of Manhattan fading behind them like a distant dream. "Are you sure this is right?" Isabella asked her driver, looking at the rundown industrial building they'd stopped in front of. "This is the address, ma'am." Isabella stepped out onto cracked pavement, her designer heels catching on uneven concrete. The building looked nothing like the pristine factories she usually worked with. But desperate times called for desperate measures. The elevator was broken, so Isabella climbed 3 flights of stairs, her irritation growing with each step. This was beneath her, beneath the Rossetti brand. But as she reached the workshop door, she steeled herself. Survival sometimes required sacrifice. The workshop hit Isabella's senses all at once: the smell of fabric and machine oil, the constant hum of sewing machines, the chatter of workers in multiple languages. It was chaos compared to her organized studio, but there was an energy here, a raw creativity that had been missing from her sterile world. Ms. Rossetti. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and calloused hands approached. I'm Carmen Valdez, the floor supervisor. Elena said you might be interested in our services. Isabella nodded curtly, her eyes already assessing the operation. The workers were skilled, their hands moving with practiced precision across expensive fabrics. But the prices Carmen quoted were almost too good to believe. How can you offer such competitive rates? Isabella asked suspiciously. Carmen's smile faded slightly. Many of our workers are flexible about documentation. They're grateful for steady work, willing to accept lower wages. Isabella understood. Desperate workers, probably undocumented, with no choice but to accept whatever they were offered. In the past, she would have walked away. But the past was a luxury she could no longer afford. As Carmen led her through the workshop, Isabella's trained eye caught details everywhere: the way one woman handled silk like it was precious, the precision of another's stitching, the natural rhythm of production that her own sanitized factories had lost. Then she saw her. In the far corner, almost hidden behind a pillar, a young girl sat at an old Singer sewing machine. She couldn't have been more than 14, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, completely absorbed in her work. What stopped Isabella cold wasn't the girl's youth, it was what she was creating. The fabric flowing through the machine was a deep emerald silk, cut in a pattern Isabella recognized with shocking clarity. It was a design from her private sketchbook, one she'd drawn during her struggling years in New York but had never produced. The asymmetrical neckline, the flowing panels, the intricate pleating, every detail was perfect. Who is that? Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible over the machine noise. Carmen followed her gaze. Oh, that's Maria. She's incredibly talented, been working here for about 6 months. Her stitching is better than women with 20 years' experience. Isabella moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. The girl Maria worked with an intensity that reminded Isabella of herself at that age. But more than that, there was something familiar about her profile, the shape of her hands, the way she held her head when concentrating. Maria? Isabella called softly. The girl looked up, and Isabella's world tilted on its axis. Looking back at her were her own eyes, the same unusual shade of green that had been passed down through generations of Rossetti women. The same eyes she remembered seeing in her younger sister Lucia, 25 years ago in their family's tiny apartment in Florence. Si, signora? Maria replied in accented English, her voice carrying the musical quality of their native Italian. Isabella's throat constricted. Where are you from? Florence, signora. My family came here 2 years ago. The workshop sounds faded to white noise as Isabella stared at this girl who couldn't possibly be who Isabella's heart was telling her she was. What's your full name? Maria Rossetti, signora. The world stopped. Isabella gripped the edge of the cutting table to keep from falling. Rossetti. This child shared her name, her eyes, her hands that moved across fabric with the same intuitive grace that had made Isabella famous. Your mother, Isabella whispered. What's your mother's name? Maria's expression grew sad. Lucia Rossetti. She died last year. Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. Lucia. Her baby sister, 8 years younger, whom Isabella had left behind when she chased her dreams to America. The sister she'd been too proud to contact when success came, too busy to visit, too afraid of judgment to maintain connection with. She used to talk about her sister in America, Maria continued, not recognizing the woman standing before her. Isabella, the famous designer. Mama said she was very proud of her, even though they hadn't spoken in many years. Isabella's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob that threatened to escape. Lucia had been proud of her. Her sister, whom she'd abandoned for ambition, had followed Isabella's career from afar, had spoken of her with love even as Isabella let years pass without a single phone call. "Your mother," Isabella managed, did she ever try to contact her sister?" Maria nodded. "Many times. She would write letters but never send them. She said Isabella was too important now, too successful to be bothered with family problems." The casual words cut deeper than any fashion critic's review ever could. While Isabella had been building her empire, Lucia had been struggling alone, raising a daughter, too proud to ask for help from the sister who had become a stranger. Isabella looked down at the dress Maria was creating for her own design, somehow transmitted across decades and an ocean to these young hands. "Where did you learn to make this pattern?" "From Mama's drawings," Maria said simply. She kept a box of designs she said came from her dreams. "She taught me to sew by copying them." Isabella's designs. Lucia must have somehow kept the sketches Isabella had sent her in those first struggling years, before success had made her forget everything except ambition. Her sister had treasured those early drawings, had taught her daughter to bring Isabella's abandoned visions to life. Could I see those drawings?" Isabella whispered. Maria's eyes lit up. "See? They're at home. Would you like to meet my Nana? She takes care of me now." Isabella nodded, not trusting her voice to work. Her mother was alive. Her sister was gone, but had left behind this remarkable daughter who carried Isabella's blood, her artistic vision, her family's legacy in her skilled young hands. As they prepared to leave the workshop, Maria carefully folded the emerald dress. "This is for a special customer," she explained. "Carmen says someone important might buy our work soon." Isabella looked at the dress, her design, perfected by her niece's hands, created with love and skill that her expensive factories had never matched. For the first time in months, she felt something stirring in her chest. Not just guilt and regret, but inspiration. Maria's home was a small apartment in Astoria, nothing like the luxury Isabella was accustomed to. But as she climbed the narrow stairs behind her niece, she felt more nervous than before any fashion show. At the top, Maria knocked gently on a door marked 3B. "Nana? Ho portato una signora importante." "Grandma? I brought an important lady." The door opened to reveal a woman in her 70s, her hair silver but her green eyes, those unmistakable Rossetti eyes, still sharp and alert. Isabella's mother, Rosa, whom she hadn't seen in 15 years. Recognition was immediate and devastating. Rosa's hand flew to her heart, her eyes filling with tears as she saw the daughter who had disappeared into the American dream and never looked back. "Isabella?" Rosa whispered in Italian. "Mia bambina?" Isabella broke. 25 years of walls, of cold professionalism, of prioritizing success over family crumbled as she fell into her mother's arms. They held each other and wept for lost years, for Lucia's death, for the family that had been broken by pride and silence. "I'm sorry, Mama," Isabella sobbed in Italian. "I'm so sorry I never came back. I'm sorry I let Lucia die thinking I didn't care." Rosa pulled back, cupping Isabella's face in withered hands. "She knew you cared, cara mia. She followed every fashion show, every article. She was so proud, but she was also afraid. Afraid you had become too big for our small family." Maria watched this reunion with growing understanding dawning in her intelligent eyes. "Nana," she said slowly, is this Mama's sister? The famous Isabella?" Rosa nodded, smiling through her tears. "This is your zia Isabella. Your aunt." Maria's mouth fell open. But that means..." "That means," Isabella said, kneeling to meet her niece's eyes, "you're not alone anymore. You have family. You have me." What followed was the most important afternoon of Isabella's life. Rosa brought out photograph albums spanning decades, pictures of Lucia growing up, falling in love, giving birth to Maria, raising her daughter with devotion and dreams of reunion with the sister who had gone to America. She saved everything you ever sent, Rosa explained, producing a worn box. Your letters from those first years, your early sketches, newspaper clippings of your success. Inside the box, Isabella found her own history, sketches she'd forgotten drawing, letters full of hope and homesickness from her struggling years, and new drawings in a similar but distinct hand. Lucia's own designs, created while raising Maria, influenced by Isabella's style but uniquely her own. Mama always said she got her talent from you, Maria said, studying the sketches. She taught me that fashion wasn't just about clothes, it was about helping people feel beautiful, feel confident. Isabella looked at her niece, brilliant, talented, carrying forward a legacy Isabella hadn't even known existed. In Maria's work, she saw not just technical skill but something that had been missing from her own recent designs, heart. Maria, Isabella said carefully, how would you feel about coming to work with me? Really work with me, not just as hired help, but as family. As a designer. Maria's eyes widened. You mean, in your real studio? With the famous people? I mean, as part of the family business that should have always included our family. That evening, as Isabella sat in her childhood home eating her mother's cooking for the first time in decades, she understood what had been missing from her work. She'd achieved everything she'd dreamed of: fame, fortune, recognition, but had lost the heart that made her designs meaningful. Looking at Maria's sketches, seeing the love and family connection in every line, Isabella realized her niece possessed what she'd forgotten, the ability to create not just for critics or customers, but for the human soul. I want to learn from you, Isabella told Maria. You understand something about design that I've lost. Maria smiled Lucia's smile, Rosa's smile, the family smile Isabella had forgotten she carried too. And I want to learn from you, Zia. Mama always said we were stronger together than apart. 3 months later, the fashion world buzzed with rumors about Isabella Rossetti's mysterious comeback collection. After months of silence following her career crisis, she had suddenly announced a new line that she claimed would redefine everything people thought they knew about her work. The Isabella Rossetti studio had been transformed. Where once sterile perfection had ruled, now there was organized chaos, sketches covering every surface, fabric samples and explosions of color, and in the center of it all, Maria, working alongside the woman she now proudly called Zia. This one needs more movement in the skirt, Maria said, pinning adjustments to a dress on the mannequin. At 14, she spoke with the authority of someone who understood fashion at a molecular level. Isabella watched her niece work, marveling at the confidence that came from growing up in a family where creativity was love made visible. Show me. Maria's hands moved across the fabric with intuitive grace, tucking and folding until the dress came alive. It was a skill that couldn't be taught, the ability to see not just how fabric should fall, but how it should make the wearer feel. Beautiful, Isabella breathed. Your mother would be so proud. The collection they were creating together was unlike anything Isabella had designed before. Each piece told a story not just of fashion, but of family, of connection, of traditions passed down through generations of women who understood that true elegance came from authenticity. Zia, Maria said one evening as they worked late in the studio, can I ask you something? Of course, Cara. Why did you stop writing to Mama? In the early letters, you sounded so happy to have family. What changed? Isabella set down her sketch, the question piercing straight to the heart of her regrets. I got scared, she admitted. When success came, I thought I had to choose between my old life and my new one. I was afraid that staying connected to home would somehow diminish what I'd built here. But family makes us stronger, not weaker. Yes, Isabella said softly. I see that now. Your mother knew it all along. She stayed proud of me even when I was too proud to stay connected to her. Maria nodded thoughtfully. She used to say that roots don't hold you back, they hold you up. The wisdom in those words, spoken by a child who had lost her mother but held onto her teachings, brought tears to Isabella's eyes. She was right. About everything. As Fashion Week approached, Isabella felt a nervous energy she hadn't experienced in years. This collection wasn't just about salvaging her career, it was about honoring Lucia's memory, celebrating Maria's talent, and showing the world that the most beautiful designs came from the most genuine places. The night before the show, Rosa joined them in the studio for a final fitting. 3 generations of Rossetti women stood together, each contributing their unique perspective to garments that represented not just fashion, but family legacy. Lucia would be so happy, Rosa said, watching Isabella and Maria work in perfect harmony. She always said you two were meant to find each other. Isabella looked at her mother, then at her niece, and realized that everything she'd lost in her climb to success had been returned to her in ways she never could have imagined. Not just family, but the creative soul that had made her legendary in the first place. Tomorrow, she told Maria, we show the world what the Rossetti women can create together. Maria smiled, her hands already moving toward their next design. Tomorrow, we show them Mama's dreams come true. The lights dimmed in the packed auditorium as New York Fashion Week's most anticipated show began. Every major editor, buyer, and celebrity had come to see whether Isabella Rossetti could reclaim her throne or if this would be her final bow. Isabella stood backstage, her heart pounding with anticipation rather than fear. Beside her, Maria adjusted the final details on their opening look, the emerald dress that had started everything, now perfected by their collaboration. "Ready, Zia?" Maria asked, squeezing Isabella's hand. "Ready, cara mia." The first model stepped onto the runway, and the audience fell silent. The dress moved like liquid poetry, each fold and drape telling a story of heritage, craftsmanship, and love. It was recognizably Isabella's aesthetic, but elevated by something deeper: humanity. As piece after piece flowed down the runway, the collection revealed its true narrative. These weren't just clothes, they were love letters to family, celebrations of tradition, homages to the women who had passed down not just skills but wisdom. The finale piece appeared, a wedding dress that combined Isabella's sophisticated minimalism with Maria's intuitive understanding of romantic femininity. It was stunning in its simplicity, breathtaking in its emotional resonance. When the last model disappeared, the silence stretched for what felt like eternity. Then, as one, the audience rose in thunderous applause. Critics who had written Isabella off were on their feet. Anna Wintour was nodding approvingly. The fashion world was welcoming back its prodigal daughter. Isabella walked onto the runway alone first, accepting the ovation she had earned through decades of work. Then she turned and gestured for Maria to join her. Her niece appeared shyly, overwhelmed by the response to their shared vision. "Ladies and gentlemen," Isabella said into the microphone, her voice carrying across the silent auditorium, "this collection was created in memory of my sister Lucia Rossetti, who understood that the most beautiful designs come from the most authentic places. And in collaboration with her daughter Maria, who taught me that family isn't something that holds you back, it's something that holds you up." The applause was deafening. But more than the professional triumph, Isabella felt the deep satisfaction of having honored her sister's memory and secured Maria's future. Later, at the after-party, as fashion luminaries praised their comeback, Isabella found herself thinking not about reviews or sales, but about the letters she'd written to Lucia that morning, an apology and a promise that would never be read but had healed her heart to write. "Zia," Maria appeared at her side, still glowing from the show's success. "What happens now?" Isabella looked at her niece, talented, grounded, carrying forward a legacy that was bigger than fashion, and smiled. "Now we go home to Nana. We have dinner as a family. And tomorrow, we start designing the rest of our lives together." As they left the glittering party for the simple warmth of Rosa's kitchen, Isabella Rossetti understood that she had finally achieved something more valuable than fame or fortune. She had found her way back to the family that had always been her greatest inspiration, and in doing so, had rediscovered the creative soul that made her not just a successful designer, but a complete human being. The thread that connected everything past to present, dream to reality, family to family, had never been broken. It had simply been waiting for Isabella to stop running long enough to see it, pick it up, and weave it into something beautiful.